Yellowstone Season 4 is about revenge, as one of the Dutton family's enemies put a hit on them at the end of Season 3. John got peppered with bullets on the side of the road, a bomb went off at Beth's office, 2 armed assailants went after Casey at the Livestock Association, and more lowlives were sent to the ranch itself. John's situation is the worst among all of them. In fact, it's so bad that he feels the need to use his blood to write the details of the van his attackers used, specifically its color and its direction. Rip gets to John right when he loses consciousness, so Rip arranges a medevac to get John to the hospital, and the note John left comes in handy because Rip shares these details with Casey, who was able to take down the attackers that came after him. Casey heads out to intercept John's attackers with the help of the Sheriff's Department and the Livestock Association. They get every single one of the assailants in an insane shootout. Casey gets hit by 2 bullets, but he recovers just fine. The recklessness on display here should get Casey in trouble because there are a lot of civilians in the crossfire when he engages. However, the show brushes past this problem and no federal agencies get involved. Beth has surprisingly survived the assassination attempt on her life, though she has some burn scars that she'll carry for the rest of her life. She must have ducked and taken cover just as the bomb went off because she noticed the unusual box at the end of Season 3, and she warned her assistant not to open it, so she sensed the threat and probably survived because of that. The guys attacking the ranch almost get to Tate and Monica, but Tate saves his mother by shooting one of the assailants. Monica and Tate head to the bunkhouse after this, where they see that more assassins are being taken care of. The only thing of value lost during this sequence is Rip's cabin, which was gifted to him by John. This used to be John's father's cabin, so it was invaluable from an emotional standpoint. So Rip loses the only material thing he's ever valued, not to mention the symbol of his connection to John. We jump forward a few months to learn that John is okay. He was comatose for a while and they didn't think he would ever wake up, but here he is. He is as grumpy as ever, which helps lighten up the mood after the insane opening sequence. John fends off any effort to take care of him. He fires his nurse and gets down to his porch. Mentally, he is back, even though he is still suffering from a physical standpoint. We see that the ranch is heavily protected now. There are livestock agents outside the gates and Casey's camped out in a ghillie suit in case anything goes wrong. Casey tells his father that every single attacker their enemy sent is dead, but John asserts that they need to find the sender. Beth believes Jamie is behind the plot. She goes after him in the Attorney General's office, promising that she will kill him herself when the time is right. Jamie insists he had nothing to do with the attacks, but this doesn't do anything to convince Beth. Also, Jamie and his biological father Garrett talk to a realtor to buy a ranch, and Jamie decides to do it, further distancing himself from the Dutton family. The main reason for this falling out is Jamie's decision to lease a part of the Yellowstone ranch to Market Equities. Jamie rightly thought that Market Equities would get the land eventually using eminent domain, which would force the Duttons to sell to the government because the land will be used to build an airport. Jamie prevents that and doesn't sell the land, he only leases it. However, this goes against John's wishes. He doesn't want an airport on his ranch, so Jamie is estranged from the Dutton family, even though from a logical standpoint, Jamie did the right thing. Going back to the mastermind of the attack, Casey thinks the Montana Free Militia did it themselves because of the events that took place in Season 2. They helped Malcolm Beck kidnap Tate back then, so the Duttons went after the militia and got the better of them. Casey thinks this must have been their revenge scheme, and John gives Casey the go-ahead to kill every remaining member of the militia they can find. Rip, in the meantime, goes after Rourke Morris. That's not because Rip thinks Rourke was behind the attacks. No, Rourke has already done something else to piss off the Duttons, by sending his goons to attack Colby and Teeter in Season 3. And Colby and Teeter barely made it out alive. So now, Rip goes up to Rourke as he is fishing and unleashes a rattlesnake, which bites him and poisons him. He runs away but collapses soon afterward. Rip comes up to him and watches him drift away. We find out more about the assassination plot at the Painted Horse Casino, as a man named Checkers is boasting about putting together the crew that went after John. Rainwater's right-hand man Mo is immediately on this because that kind of information can be useful. It can tell Rainwater who they should be watching out for because they could be their next target. Mo goes old school and drags Checkers behind a horse to get him to speak, and Checkers eventually cracks, though we don't hear what he's got to say. The company building the airport, Market Equities, has a new CEO whose name is Caroline Warner. She is in town because a skull is found on the construction site of the airport and construction is halted. Caroline makes Rainwater a sweet offer, claiming they will fund the reservations, casino and hotel construction, and together they will turn this place into the new Las Vegas. In exchange, she wants the airport construction to continue. Rainwater is hesitant because the offer sounds too good to be true, so he wants to see the actual fine print of the deal to believe it. Beth has a chat with her former boss Bob Schwartz, who sold her out by selling Schwartz and Meyer to Market Equities. Bob and Beth had bought a lot of land around the Yellowstone Ranch to put it in a conservation reserve program, and this way they prevented urbanization while also making money from this government program. Beth tells Bob to re-examine the fine print of the agreement between the Yellowstone Ranch and Schwartz and Meyer, suggesting that the Duttons co-own the land with Schwartz and Meyer. So now their parent company Market Equities doesn't have full control over the land they acquired, which means that they can't use that land in their projects. Other than that, Beth is busy with a kid she meets at the hospital, Carter. This little fella is a troublemaker because his father passes away from a drug overdose and he gets involved in some criminal activities. Beth takes him under her wings, but Rip says not so fast. Carter is like a small version of Rip and he eventually warms up to the kid and gives him a chance. As you know, Beth can't have children, and that's probably why she warms up to Carter so quickly. Carter has a mouth on him like Beth. He is an orphan like Rip, so he doesn't really feel like a stranger. He's like a mixture of Beth and Rip. And Carter ends up becoming the new stable boy. Jimmy is alive too, by the way, though his physical situation is less than ideal. John had explicitly told him not to do rodeo anymore, and Jimmy promised John he wouldn't, but he went ahead and broke his promise, as well as his back. John is sending him away with Travis to the 4 Sixes Ranch in Texas to see if he can finally become a proper cowboy. Travis is a horse trainer we've seen in previous seasons. He is portrayed by the showrunner himself, Taylor Sheridan, and going forward, John wants Travis to represent the Yellowstone Ranch because he wants people to think of Yellowstone when they think of horses. So Travis agrees to put together a team to execute this vision, which has the potential to make the ranch a lot of money. But this venture will require an investment in the millions, and John is willing to do it because he needs to turn the ranch into a national brand. Name recognition on this valley alone doesn't cut it anymore, as they get crushed by big companies like Market Equities. So this is John's plan to go national. Episode 3 begins with a montage showing the demise of the Montana Free Militia, as Casey keeps his promise to his father by going after all the remaining militia members he can find. Multiple law enforcement agencies band together to conduct simultaneous raids, while Rip and Lloyd take care of some other guys. The next day, Rainwater reaches out to John about Checkers. He's apparently still alive after Mo dragged him behind a horse. In fact, he is in Mo's backyard, but he isn't there for long because they're giving him to John. Rainwater and Mo meet with John, saying that a man called Riggins ordered the hits. John doesn't know this Riggins fella, but learns that he is in prison. So for now, John has to take out the trash he's got, meaning Checkers. So John personally visits the proverbial train station, where he claims that he can't just assassinate somebody. He cuts Checkers loose and leaves a gun on the ground to make this a standoff. John comes out on top and the train station claims yet another body. John is okay with ordering Rip or Lloyd to straight out assassinate people, but he can't go through with something like that himself. For example, he told Rip to get rid of a medical examiner in Season 1, and Rip did it. So John is okay with that, but he himself can't just execute someone, showing that no matter how ruthless you are, taking a life with your own hands is a completely different ballgame. John doesn't think he can live with himself if he simply executes trickers. He needs to feel that he gave the guy a fair chance so that he can live with himself, which is why he turned this into a standoff. In the meantime, Casey helps out a rancher by the name of Emmett Walsh by intimidating his new Californian neighbor, because this guy has placed cattle guards on his easement, and Walsh is having trouble passing through the land with his cattle. As the livestock commissioner, Casey uses brute force to take care of this issue, placing the Californian under the cattle guards. Walsh eventually finds the guy and this issue is settled. Casey's day takes a turn for the worse when he comes back to the ranch, because Monica and Tate are still hanging out in their room months after the attack. Tate spends most of his time under the bed because he had to kill a person to defend his mother, and he doesn't know what to do with that. It is hard to believe that Casey has let this go for 2 whole months, but at least he does something about it in this episode by forcing Tate out and comforting him. Monica goes on about how evil Casey's family and this ranch is, even though she accepted this reality back in season 2, when they were going after the men who kidnapped Tate. So Monica is as insufferable as she always is. Things aren't great between Beth and Carter either, because Carter acts like a spoiled brat, according to Beth anyway. He doesn't listen to what Beth says they'll buy in town, and Beth realizes that whatever this is isn't going to satisfy her need to have children. She can't act like Carter is her little boy, and this realization makes her sad because she can't have children. Rip takes over the reins as Carter is kicked out of the house. Carter is gonna live in the stable now, and Rip will have to handle Carter cautiously and educate him properly if he is to turn into a real man one day. Jimmy is off to the 4-6's ranch in Texas with the horse trainer John hired in the premiere, and this means that Jimmy's girlfriend Maya breaks up with him. To start episode 4, John mentions Riggins to Casey, asking him to meet with Jamie and arrange Riggins' interrogation. This is sort of a test because if Jamie hesitates when Casey mentions Riggins, they'll know Jamie might have something to do with the hit. If he's helpful though and agrees to interview Riggins, he is probably clean. We see Jamie on his new ranch with his biological father Garrett. Later on, Casey pays Jamie a visit in his office, and Casey is a little bit displeased with his brother because he hasn't visited them once after the attacks, and Casey wonders why. Jamie explains that he's had to keep his distance while he protected them behind the scenes. He provided police protection for John for 2 months at the hospital. He made sure that the investigation into what happened at the ranch, as well as Casey's actions that endangered civilians, were swept under the rug. By not contacting the family at all, Jamie made sure that the allegations of collusion would be unfounded. He can say now that he is an open book, that he's not called or met them once, and he would be right. And in the meantime, he did what he thought was best for the family behind the scenes. This still doesn't fully explain why federal agencies like the ATF were sitting idly by while chaos unfolded, but at least we know the reason behind the lack of action by local authorities. When Casey mentions Riggins to Jamie, he says he'll put together an interview after contacting Riggins' lawyer. Jamie will be there personally with a homicide detective, making sure that everything is above board. And for the moment, it looks like this paves the way for Jamie to patch things up with John. But Jamie gets a detailed file on Riggins toward the end of the episode, which contains the names of Riggins' former cellmates. One of these names is Garrett Randall, Jamie's biological father. Jamie is shocked and he is facing a dilemma. Will he choose his biological father Garrett or the man that raised him, John? Beth meets up with Caroline this week, and after they exchange some punches, Caroline offers Beth a job. Beth isn't interested unless she is given a controlling stake in Schwartz & Meyer, the company she used to work for, which is now owned by Market Equities. Beth's plan is to take revenge on her former boss, Bob Schwartz. In exchange, Beth will help Market Equities build the new Aspen in Montana, so she'll turn a portion of Montana into a holiday destination. And if she does that, the Dutton Ranch will remain untouched because Market Equities will not need anything else from the Duttons. That's what Caroline claims anyway. It remains to be seen if she lives up to her end of the bargain. Monica is helicopter parenting as she bathes Tate, who I think is around 10 years old now, so this is incredibly weird. Anyway, Casey finally finds a solution to their problems by taking Tate and Monica to her grandfather's home. Casey will be away from the ranch for a while and then he will commute back and forth between the ranch and the reservation. So this decision clearly impacts John because he liked having his son around all the time. Things boil over between Lloyd and Walker over an annoying Buckle Bunny, which results in a fistfight. Lloyd is obsessing over a woman that could be the same age as his daughter, despite the fact that they've never even had a real relationship, as this girl, Laramie, only flirted with Lloyd. He can't let it go because of his pride. He feels humiliated because Laramie chose Walker. Rip himself takes care of Lloyd afterward because fighting on the ranch is forbidden. This leaves Lloyd completely aggrieved. He is embarrassed after getting his ass kicked by his best friend in front of all the ranch hands. We also check in on Jimmy and Travis for a bit as they attend some horse shows. Travis is now representing the Yellowstone Ranch and he wins tens of thousands of dollars in just a few days. That was what John had in mind when he put this together, and things can get even better in the future if they can sell some of the horses because they have the potential to go for hundreds of thousands of dollars. John's loneliness is the most important theme of episode 5 as he spends an entire day going around doing nothing but admiring the view he's got. It's clear that Casey's move away from the ranch has affected him, and he keeps wondering why every member of his family has to run away from the ranch to find happiness. Beth surprises John somewhat inappropriately, and John slowly opens up to Beth, telling her that seeing her here makes him happy, that it makes his heart full. John then says he hopes Beth survives her, and Beth comforts him with a great response, saying that only the good die young. This conversation is a reminder to John that he's not entirely alone, even if it feels that way sometimes. His daughter is still by his side and fighting for the ranch, which means John himself has got something to live for and something to look forward to in life. Not everybody has abandoned him. Beth has to go on a business trip a couple days later to Salt Lake City, Utah, where Schwartz & Meyer's headquarters are located. Before the 7-hour road trip, Beth is with her dad during breakfast, who asks her what her plan is. She explains that she is taking the job at Market Equities in exchange for a controlling interest in Schwartz & Meyer. Her official role will be the president of Market Equities Montana division. By helping them build resorts all around Montana, she thinks she will ensure that her family's land remains in their own hands. She also has other ideas though, as she wants to blow up the company from the inside. That's one of the main reasons why she took the job. She arrives in Salt Lake City and barges into Bob Schwartz's office, telling him that he is fired and that Schwartz & Meyer is moving to Montana. This whole ordeal means that the Yellowstone Ranch is mostly safe because they own a bunch of land around the ranch with Schwartz & Meyer. Beth controls that company now, and the land is in a conservation reserve program, meaning it's not being farmed and nothing will be built on it. Life is slowly going back to normal for Casey's family as they move to Monica's grandfather's house, and Tate goes through a few sweat ceremonies. Rainwater and Monica have a chat after one of those, and I quite liked Rainwater's comment about what happened to Tate. Rainwater says, "Society has taught kids they're sheep and that they need somebody's protection, so when wolves attack and you strike back, you feel like you've done something wrong even if you protected your own life." Monica is also looking for a house between the res and the city of Bozeman. She's got a place in mind and Casey seems to be okay with this plan. So this problem might be behind Casey now, but a new problem awaits in front of his office building. A bunch of activists are protesting the Livestock Association, and one of these people tries to grab Casey, which is a terrible idea. Things heat up and livestock agent Hendon gets involved. Guns are drawn and people start throwing stones at them. Sheriff Haskell shows up to calm things down, and afterward, Casey calls John. John's reaction to this news is priceless. He can't believe it. He is in disbelief, just like I was when I saw this storyline. So anyway, John shows up in the city of Livingston to take a look. He has a conversation with the main organizer of the protest, Summer Higgins, who says they're protesting the mass murder of animals and the police force that protects these acts, meaning the Livestock Association. John retorts her, and at first he wants the sheriff to press charges to teach Summer a lesson, but I suppose his current state of mind, his loneliness, causes him to be more considerate. He thinks this isn't going to teach Summer anything really. She will probably double down on her convictions, so John decides to bail her out to offer her a tour of his ranch, to show her what actually goes on behind the curtain, what this way of life that scares her is actually about. Summer is a full-blown SJW with the vocabulary of a 3-year-old, so naturally she spouts some nonsense about not getting in the car with a white male. John's like, okay, bye, but then she changes her mind and gets in the truck. Moving on to Jamie, he gets to the bottom of the attack on the Duttons by interviewing Riggins. He opens up to Jamie in exchange for immunity, and although we don't hear what he's got to say, it's obvious that he reveals Garrett as the man behind the assassination plot, and we can infer this from the fact that Jamie goes on to confront Garrett. Before Jamie can do that though, Christina comes out of nowhere with her and Jamie's child. We haven't seen Christina since season 2 when she told Jamie about the pregnancy. She left him because he went back to his family and she didn't want anything to do with the Duttons. But now that Jamie is free from them, she comes back. The timing of her return suggests that Garrett put this together to patch things up between his son and Christina. Jamie is able to confront his biological father Garrett at the start of episode 6 as Christina and the child are out of the way. Jamie approaches his father with a pistol, ordering him to walk back with his hands on his head, but Garrett does not comply, instead turning his chair around and talking. This exchange tells us everything we need to know about the dynamics in this relationship, about who is in control, and about how gullible Jamie can be. Garrett claims he gave Jamie the strength to walk away from the shadow of that quote-unquote freaking land baron Jamie called father for the entire lie of his life. John hid the truth from Jamie, and as far as Jamie is concerned, Garrett has been the exact opposite, always appearing honest even when it doesn't benefit himself. Garrett keeps being upfront, admitting that he did indeed go after the Duttons, and adding that he would do it again and again until Jamie gets the empire he deserves. Garrett's manipulation is at its best when he brings up Jamie's child, saying that Christina would be gone if Jamie ever went back to John. Jamie must choose Garrett if he wants to keep his new family intact, and Garrett claims he will make sure that the Yellowstone Dutton Ranch becomes Jamie's one day. That way, Jamie's new family will be set for generations. Casey's the only one Jamie says he would miss, but Garrett's like, how much do you actually know him? And that is a good point. Casey has spent most of his life away from the ranch, first as a soldier and then on the res with Monica, so Jamie feels like there's a strong bond between him and Casey, but Garrett says that is just an illusion. Jamie tries to make this about right and wrong, which Garrett dismisses entirely. He believes there is no such thing, and that those are words men invented to scare and shame other men from taking back what they've stolen. As Jamie starts letting his guard down, Garrett approaches his son and embraces him as he breaks down crying. Jamie's only other scene is at the Attorney General's office, where he has an early appointment with the head of operations from Market Equities. He has no idea that this position is now held by Beth, so his reaction when he sees her is genuinely funny. Jamie realizes Beth is going to ruin the airport project, and she confirms that that is indeed her plan. Beth checks in on her father and comes across Summer, the activist from episode 5 John bailed out. Apparently, she has spent the night at the ranch with John, and Beth is incredibly rude toward her, picking up a knife to threaten her, which makes her think that Beth is John's wife. John tries to cool things down, but he's not successful. Beth is eventually told to leave, and John gets on his truck to drop Summer off. They see a calf on the wrong side of the fence. John and Rip handle this situation, and witnessing life on the ranch makes Summer realize that these ranchers truly love what they do. And just as I'm about to be like, okay, Summer isn't too bad, she says she'll walk the rest of the way. That's gonna take hours, but okay, you do you. The biggest incident in this episode is initiated by Carter of all people, as he learns how to rope with Lloyd. Lloyd says they're both outcasts and that Carter should apologize to Beth properly. Carter responds by saying that Lloyd should take his own advice before dishing it out. Lloyd isn't too amused and goes back to the bunkhouse where he smashes Walker's guitar and then stabs him. The other ranch hands apprehend Lloyd. They call the shady veterinarian who we have occasionally seen in previous seasons. He patches Walker up because the knife didn't do any permanent damage. It missed his heart and arteries apparently. And in between all of this, Maya leaves after saying, "Fudge this place." John and Rip learn about this incident and John is extremely disappointed because Lloyd has served the ranch for 30 years. He's a branded man, so he's the one who takes care of problems, not the one that starts them. That's the only reason why Lloyd is still alive, and John decides to fire all the ladies from the bunkhouse, including Teeter, even though she is branded. John also orders Rip to put Lloyd and Walker in the pen so that they can fight this rivalry out of their systems. The two fight for a good while before Lloyd comes out on top, and he is still ready to go. The fight isn't out of his system, which is why John gets prepared to put him down himself. Normally, Rip would be asked to do this, but John doesn't want Rip to have to beat his friend. Rip, however, knows that this would cause the ranch hands to hate John, which is why Rip says he can do it himself. After giving Lloyd a hug, Rip beats the crap out of him and both Walker and Lloyd are done. Fighting until you can't breathe will do that to you, but how Walker is still alive is a mystery. He would have bled out in that pen if he didn't have plot armor. We have two incredible moments after the fight, and one of them involves Rip. We see that he is truly affected by this because Lloyd is the only person in this world that he would call his friend. He was going to be the best man at Rip's wedding, so Rip is emotional because he had to deliver a beatdown to his best friend. The only other time I can remember Rip getting this sentimental was when John gave his father's house to Rip and wrote in a letter that Rip is a part of this family. The other incredible moment has to do with Carter. Rip told Carter to watch the fight so that he can learn this lesson without having to go through it himself, and it turns out he did learn his lesson. Carter points to John after the fight, saying, "I want to be him when I grow up." That's a smart kid right there. He realizes the cons of the ranch and lifestyle on the Yellowstone ranch, and instead he wants to own a ranch himself, like John. That way he doesn't have to do the dirty work like Lloyd, Rip, or Walker. Casey's off house hunting with Monica and Tate, and they find a house they like. That day, Rainwater asks Casey for his help, as more than a dozen racehorses have been stolen from a house in the res. The thieves almost immediately went out of the res into a piece of land supervised by the Forest Service, so Casey's gonna investigate this matter as the livestock commissioner. We should also mention that Monica is jealous of Avery, one of the daughters of the family whose horses were stolen. Avery worked at the Dunn Ranch for a short period, so Casey recognizes her from there, and Monica gets jealous. Beth's first day at Market Equities is eventful because when she walks into the meeting room, she finds them discussing their plans for Montana. We already know about the airport, but apparently they don't plan on stopping there. They're also going to build condos, casinos, hotels, and everything else you can think of on the Yellowstone Ranch. They haven't secured this land yet, but they plan to. Everything left of the yellow line here is the Yellowstone Ranch. The red bit is the airport and Market Equities already have that land, but the rest, the stuff in green and blue, they either need to buy that or acquire it via the state using eminent domain, a power that allows the government to forcefully buy private land for public use. And condos and roads, I suppose, enable the state to use that power. But at this moment, none of that has happened. Beth is kinda shocked to see this because in her deal with the Market Equity CEO Caroline, they agreed that Beth would deliver them a project like this, but they would keep their hands off the Yellowstone Ranch. Turns out Caroline isn't keeping her end of the bargain, and Beth's loyalty is called into question by Alice Steele. They're seeing if Beth will oblige or go against them. Well, you know Beth, she can't help herself, but she has to be a little bit discreet because she doesn't want to lose her job at Market Equities. The information she gets with her position there is invaluable. For example, she would have no idea about these extended plans if she didn't accept the job offer. Beth is quick on her feet when she encounters Summer at yet another protest. Beth lets Summer know that what she's doing isn't helping a single animal, she's not making a difference, and Beth here is trying to make Summer mad because she wants Summer to do something that would benefit the ranch. So after she gets Summer going, she shows Summer where this giant corporation is planning to build an airport, and she says that's a movement Summer should focus on because it will have an actually detectable impact on wildlife and nature. Beth obviously doesn't care about that part, but she's just trying to do everything she can to disrupt or maybe delay the airport project. In the meantime, John is busy with some ranch work when Teeter approaches him, asking to stay on as a ranch hand. And it turns out John didn't know that Teeter was branded, because the attempt on John's life took place just a day after Colby, Teeter, and Ryan got branded, and Rip didn't have a chance to mention this to John. Teeter is able to stay on after this discussion, but John is a little bit pissed off at Rip for not telling him about this. Things get really interesting when Governor Linnell Perry shows up at the ranch to have a word with John, who's like, oh, this must be really bad if the governor's here. And it is indeed pretty bad, at least for John, because Perry is preparing for a Senate run and she's ready to support Jamie for his gubernatorial campaign. He doesn't even want to hear about it, and Kevin Costner's acting here is absolutely brilliant because he perfectly displays the fact that John is repulsed by the mere utterance of Jamie's name. Perry responds by suggesting that John gets into politics. She would like him to throw his hat in the ring in the gubernatorial race, and even though at first John doesn't want to even entertain this idea, he agrees to do it just to prevent Jamie from getting Perry's endorsement. You can see how much John dislikes politics after Perry leaves, as he just pops off for having to get into politics. It's fair to say that Beth has the exact opposite reaction upon learning about this. She's over the moon because, firstly, she knows this screws over Jamie, and secondly, this allows the family to tell market equities and companies like those to F off. With enough support, John would fend market equities off, and then he would eventually introduce legislation that would preserve the ranching way of life. This is what convinces John to accept his fate. Governor Perry hosts a press conference the next day to announce her Senate run and to endorse a new candidate for governor. Jamie thinks that person will be him, but he's in for a surprise because Perry introduces John and Jamie is left speechless as Beth goes, "This is just the beginning." John's speech is perfect, and he's getting the rural vote for sure, and he also has the backing of the current governor, so let's just say his chances are pretty good. The only thing that can stop him is his scandalous past. Jamie can expose him, for example, because he has dirt on his father, but it's a mutually assured destruction. Jamie would go to prison if he went after John's reputation, because John's got dirt on Jamie too. This press conference puts Jamie and John in the same place for the first time since the attacks, and to celebrate this occasion, John sarcastically thanks Jamie for the flowers he sent to the hospital. Earlier in the episode, we see Jamie having fun with his son, while Garrett and Christina have a chat. Garrett wants Christina to help Jamie run for governor, so this was already at the back of Garrett and Jamie's mind, making the snub at the end all the more impactful. Beth and Carter patch things up and the kid starts living with Beth and Rip again. They won't be living at that house for long though, because John wants them to move into the main lodge. He tries to ask Rip to move in, though it sounds like an order at first. But yeah, Rip agrees and this is a nice feel-good moment. Maybe John won't feel too lonely anymore. Casey and Mo star in their new buddy cop western spin-off as they recover the racehorses stolen from the ranch in the reservation, but they're not able to find the thieves. Lloyd patches things up with Walker by gifting him a nice guitar, because Lloyd broke Walker's guitar before, and Lloyd has to trade in a valuable belt buckle to get the guitar, which signals to us that this feud is completely over. John is taking the cattle to market with Rip in episode 8 when Jamie gives John a call saying that he wants to meet. Jamie wants to discuss the gubernatorial election because John's decision to run for office has put a spanner in the works, as Jamie thought he would be the next governor of Montana. John is not sympathetic, telling Jamie that they can meet at the ranch anytime. Jamie doesn't like that idea and wants to set up this meeting at a neutral venue. This antagonistic relationship between John and Jamie is immediately contrasted with John and Rip's relationship, because Rip doesn't ask any questions when John tells Rip that they'll see the sheriff after they drop off the cattle. Rip is the only person in John's life who doesn't question him or tries to change his mind. He's always there to support John. John's kids, on the other hand, are usually the opposite, because they always have their own angle. They can't ever go in blind. This is a little bit messed up because Rip has been taught to obey John no matter what, as John gave Rip a life after he killed his abusive father. So Rip owes John and he can never repay his debt. That said, I think this loyalty by Rip is genuine. I'm not saying he feels obliged to be this loyal. I think he truly cares for John, but all of this context has to be kept in mind. This is not a completely pure relationship. They're meeting the sheriff to discuss the assassination plot, but as John and Rip approach the place, they notice that the sheriff is just sitting there not eating, and there are also a few shady-looking fellas inside. After John and Rip act like they leave, the guys inside go on with their main objective, which is to rob the place. Rip and John don't actually leave the premises. They get their guns from the truck. John gets into the diner using the back entrance, and a shootout ensues soon afterward. John is not a law enforcement officer anymore, but Montana allows you to make a citizen's arrest, and there is probable cause in this scenario. The robbers have guns and they appear to have taken hostages. Plus, John doesn't shoot the first guy inside the diner until that robber points his gun at John. So John isn't breaking the law here. This ordeal won't be an issue for John's political future, because a lot of people from Montana on this show will see John as a hero for stopping these robbers and saving these civilians. All the robbers are taken care of by John and Rip, but Sheriff Haskell gets shot during the gunfight and he passes away. This obviously means that John has lost one of his best allies. Even though they haven't always seen eye to eye, they've had a good relationship for a while, and now John can't do anything about Riggins. They also have to elect a new sheriff. That's gonna take a while, and that new guy may not be John's ally, so Jamie might get an advantage because of that. This also relates to the flashback from the start of the episode, because we see John's great-grandfather James taking care of a bunch of horse thieves. So the episode starts with a Dutton killing thieves, and it also ends with another Dutton doing the same. John's decision to run has ruined Jamie's mood, but Christina and Garrett do a good job of boosting his morale. Christina points out the fact that John hasn't run for office before because he doesn't think he can win. She thinks John is bluffing just to stop Jamie. She urges Jamie to call John's bluff, and Jamie agrees to do so. Meanwhile, Beth's plan to use Summer's activism to damage market equities goes well, as Summer and hundreds of other activists are protesting the airport construction. In a market equities meeting, Beth argues that they should get the press out of there before arresting and charging the protesters. Caroline obliges and Beth gets the press out of there, but she plans to notify them when the arrests take place. She goes through with this plan and the press captures the violent clash between the protesters and law enforcement. Beth then uses her contact at the New York Times to make this national news. Beth's table anxiety is back in this episode as she, Rip, and Carter move into the lodge with John. Carter's finally got some new clothes, so that is good news, but Beth makes everything awkward at the table as she always does, and Carter has no idea what's going on. Rip has a little chat with Beth about this, and she says she can't stand that room and that table because they're the symbol of the lie of the Dutton family. She doesn't think they are a real family, they're broken, and the memories of that table overwhelm Beth with anxiety whenever she's there. That's why she keeps acting out. Rip has a simple solution. He says, let's just eat somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't trigger bad memories, and this plan works. Oh, and Monica is pregnant. Why not? The penultimate episode of the season is titled No Such Thing as Fair, which is taken from a conversation Carter and John have when they go on a morning ride, during which John tries to teach Carter how to ride a horse. When they take a break to admire the view, John explains why this area is known as the Buffalo Valley. He talks about how his great-grandfather James Dutton lied to the army about the location of the buffalo because the army wanted to kill the buffalo to hurt the Indians. James Dutton saved the buffalo in this area, but that hasn't really helped the Indians. The buffalo now reside in ranches and preserves, and Carter talks about how all of this is not fair. And John goes, "Let me tell you what fair means. Fair means one side got exactly what they wanted in a way that the other side can't complain about. There is no such thing as fair." John is right, fairness isn't a part of the equation when it comes to this world, when it comes to getting what you want, when it comes to winning, because there's always somebody in your way when you want to get something valuable. Now that doesn't mean you're in the right for going through whoever's in your way, but that's just the way it is. If you look back at history and search for fairness, good luck. Moving on to the fallout from the diner shootout, Beth isn't too happy about the fact that Rip let John play the hero at the diner, but Rip argues that nobody can stop John from doing what he wants to do. We get more backstory on the robbers as Jamie, Garrett, and Christina watch the news. Apparently, the robbers were part of the local militia, presumably the Montana Free Militia, because they're the ones that have a feud with the Duttons. You might remember that there was a cleanup earlier in the season when a lot of their members either got killed or arrested, but this robbery makes it clear to us that some of them are still out there. John is mostly viewed as a hero for intervening and saving all of those civilians, and the fact that these guys were militia members helps John's image immensely because it makes it obvious for the people of Montana that John was right to intervene. Jamie knows that too, which is why he is so somber, but Christina spins the situation to boost his morale. She argues that this doesn't change anything in the election because John only consolidated his rural base, and Jamie still has a good chance to beat John if he wins the vote in the big cities. She thinks Jamie will need to publicly distance himself from John and introduce Garrett, but there's one obvious problem with that. Garrett killed Jamie's mother. Christina can't believe Jamie is telling her this just now, and she thinks Jamie should distance himself from Garrett too. Garrett understands that Jamie has to do this, he's okay with it, but Jamie is still too sentimental and doesn't want to forego his relationship with his father. Beth loses it when she sees her father. She throws a cup at him and urges him to sort himself out because she can't relive what she went through when John was in a coma for 60 days. John says he can't help himself, this is the way he is, he has to do what he feels like is right in his heart and his soul. Beth changes the subject to the assassination plot. She shows her father her scars and asks him what he's doing about it. And John's response here is interesting because he says he believes that Riggins was sending a message to other gang members about how strong he was by attempting to kill the Duttons. He wasn't buying Riggins as the mastermind at first, that's why he sent Casey to Jamie to ask him to interview Riggins, but now things have changed. Beth wants to know if John is going after this Riggins fella, and John says he can't waste his life chasing a cornered animal sitting in a prison, and this answer clearly leaves Beth unsatisfied. She seems ready to take matters into her own hands. John gets a call from Summer. She's in jail after getting arrested during the airport protest, and she's being charged with 2 counts of assaulting a peace officer, and the prosecution is seeking a life sentence because they want to make an example out of her. John pays her a visit, during which Summer reveals that it was Beth's idea to slap a cop. Summer's attorney thinks she can get Summer out of this with a suspended sentence on the condition that she would plead guilty to the lesser charges and that she would never return to Montana. John, in the meantime, will talk to the judge because the judge owes him a favor. He also promises Summer that he'll get her out of this. We meet the interim sheriff here as well. His name is Bill Ramsey, and he makes it clear that he's nothing like Haskell. He says he will follow the law to the letter, even when it concerns John and his business. Haskell's death is already affecting John's status in the county. We also have the long-awaited Garrett versus John scene in this episode. Garrett blames John for his life in prison sentence because John didn't mention the fact that Jamie was sucking on a drug pipe while Jamie's mother was selling her body for drugs. But John believes Garrett was the one who turned Jamie's mother into what she became, suggesting that Garrett either pimped her out or they did drugs together. I've always argued that Garrett wasn't being honest about the full picture, and John's comment here supports my observation. So Jamie's mother probably didn't suddenly lose it, and Garrett had something to do with that, but he's never mentioned that to Jamie. Then John issues a warning to Garrett, saying, quote, "If your plan is to get me back for what you did to yourself, I will treat you like everyone else who showed up with the same idea, and I will rid the freaking world of you." End quote. John continues by gifting Garrett a last meal of sorts, saying that he should enjoy it because you never know which meal will be your last. Toward the end of the episode, John finally treats Beth like an adult rather than his little princess. He thinks she went too far by using Summer as a piece on the chessboard because he classifies Summer as sheep, and that is not what the Dunn family fights. No, they fight wolves. John doesn't want any collateral damage and he wants to fight with dignity, but Beth argues that in this kingdom, there is no morality. You either keep the kingdom or you lose it. And that is what John has been doing this whole time. Keeping his promise to his father to preserve the ranch has been his primary objective all his life, and he uses people all the time to do his dirty work to achieve that goal. Yes, maybe he doesn't use civilians like Summer, but he's not too concerned about crossing the line either, is he? Even though I think John is right to put Beth in her place, as she has been given too much leeway, we can also understand why Beth wouldn't care about what happens to Summer. This back and forth culminates with John coming to the decision that he should wage this war on his own, so he wants Beth to move out of the main lodge. Beth is shell-shocked because prior to this she had always been treated differently than her brothers, but it is also possible that John is protecting Beth from her own fury by distancing himself from her. Carter and Rip are at the bunkhouse during this exchange. They're having fun because Carter turns out to be a poker master. Beth shows up and asks Walker to sing her a sad song, and Walker obliges. Rip sees them, but he doesn't go near them. Casey has been seeing a particular wolf over the course of the show's history. You might remember the sighting in season 3 at the summer camp, and there was another one in episode 8 of this season, just before Monica told Casey she was pregnant. This has been a puzzling experience for Casey, which is why he's been chatting with Mo and Rainwater about it. They tell him that he must go on a vision quest to find out why this wolf has been protecting and watching over him. He'll have to go without food or water for 4 days and 4 nights because Mo says he must stand on the cliff of death to understand his purpose in life. Casey doesn't appear too enthusiastic about all of this, but he's willing to try it out. Checking in on Jimmy, he's become a decent cowboy now. The people over at the 4-6's ranch trust him to haul horses to horse shows, and Travis thinks if that's the case, Jimmy's introductory education is complete and he can head back to the Yellowstone ranch. Jimmy and his new girlfriend Emily's relationship is in danger because of this, but Jimmy asks her to wait and she accepts. We also learned that the Yellowstone Ranch now partly owns Metallic Cat, a horse that's won more than $30 million in prize money, and people are paying a lot of money to breed Metallic Cat with a female horse because he's got the pedigree of success. So that's why they now co-own this horse, and this business John got into at the start of the season is going really well. Let's get Casey, Summer, and Jimmy out of the way before we get to the main event. Casey's vision quest features his late brother Lee, who died all the way back in the first episode of Season 1 in a shootout between the Livestock Association and the Reservation Police. Lee's appearance suggests that Casey's vision quest is about making a choice between the Dutton family and his own family. He sees 2 paths at the end of his vision quest, and both of them disturb him, as he later tells Monica that he has seen the quote-unquote end of us. It is my belief that one road leads to the demise of the Dutton family, while the other destroys his own family. Lee's appearance represents the destruction of the Yellowstone Ranch and the Dutton family. Avery's appearance, on the other hand, symbolizes the demise of his own family. The path Casey chooses will be crucial for the outcome of this story, but this decision will be explored in Season 5. John did say he would talk to the judge about Summer's situation, and he keeps his promise, but Judge Davis does not seem too lenient. Even though the prosecution and the defense agree on a suspended sentence, the judge sentences her to multiple decades in prison. John calls in the favor Judge Davis owes him. The judge agrees to suspend the felonies and lowers Summer's prison time to 8 months. This judge was right about Summer though. She was breaking the law for no reason because what she was doing wasn't changing anything, making her just a low-life criminal with no tangible end product. If you're committing crimes and your actions are in vain, should you just be let go? I don't think so. That said, the judge's initial sentencing was way too harsh. I don't think she deserves to spend decades in prison, but she shouldn't get off with no prison time either. So I suppose in the end, 8 months is fair. Jimmy's back from the 4-6's ranch. He's brought Metallic Cat to Yellowstone. That's the name of the new horse they own, which has won more than $30 million in prize money. Jimmy has brought Emily with him too. They are engaged now, and this angers Maya, who for some reason is still hanging out in the bunkhouse. Maya and Emily get into it. Jimmy gets a handle on the situation and has a chat with Maya. Maya did tell him that if he left, they would be through, but now she's expecting him to take her back. Fair to say Jimmy has made the right choice by picking Emily. Maya is insufferable. John and Jimmy catch up after this. John says Jimmy's debt has been paid and he doesn't have to stay here, so Jimmy and Emily head back to Texas at the end of the episode. And weirdly, Jimmy has had the most recognizable and the most sound character arc this season. His new cowboy skills and his mature attitude impresses the other ranch hands. He shares an emotional moment with Lloyd, who has always been nice to Jimmy, and this scene made me a little bit sad. Lloyd can't even talk when Jimmy is leaving. He just tips his hat, and Jimmy gets a happy ending as he rides off into the sunset. Time to talk about our main storyline. Beth is packing up to start the season 4 finale and she's getting ready to leave the main lodge because what she did to Summer was too much for John to accept. Beth makes too much noise, waking up Rip, who tells her that if she breaks his promise to him, it will stay broken. She can't come back after a while and expect things to be the same between them. She's used to doing that, but that's not gonna cut it anymore. This ultimatum causes Beth to change her mind. She wakes up John, finally saying that she's sorry for what she's done to Summer and that she will fight the way John wants her to fight. She then asks John if she can stay, and John gives her his permission, while also making sure to say that he loves her. Caroline decides she's had enough. She figures out that Beth has been working against them from the inside, so she fires Beth. Caroline warns Beth that they'll be coming after her because she has committed corporate espionage. Beth doesn't care too much because she thinks that'll be impossible to prove. Caroline goes on to launch a personal attack, promising to turn the Dutton Lodge into a public restroom when she's done with them. She says she'll do unspeakable things to the ranch, and I can't say what it is because YouTube doesn't like the R word, but fair to say Caroline is angry. Earlier in the day, Beth and Carter have a little moment when Carter says to her, "Morning, Mama," and she answers back by saying, "Hey, baby." This interaction is rather casual, but Beth stops, thinks for a few seconds, and then tells Carter not to call her Mama because, according to her, she's not Carter's mom, she is his friend. Carter can't hold back his tears because Beth is her usual mean self. She could have been gentler, but she chose violence. Why you would hurt a child like that, I never understand. I get that Beth is rightly emotional about this, but it doesn't give her the right to hurt others. These kinds of interactions can really harm a child because they are emotional and they don't know how to deal with rejection. As to why Beth doesn't want Carter to view her as his mother, there is a good reason for it. She's planning to do something drastic soon. She plans to visit Riggins in prison, and if things were to go wrong, Carter would lose his mother once again. Beth doesn't want Carter to feel like he's lost his mother for a second time, but like I said, she could have been gentler while explaining this. We learn about Beth's prison plan during her conversation with Walker. She asks him about conjugal visits, and she would like to know how to get a weapon into jail. And Walker says she should distract the guards with her quote-unquote assets, if you know what I mean, to sneak in a hairpin. How she's able to put this conjugal visit together without Riggins' knowledge is a mystery, but here we are. Riggins admits that he wasn't the mastermind of the assassination plot and that he told this to the lawyer who interviewed him, meaning Jamie. And because of this, Beth doesn't go through with her initial plan to kill Riggins, instead delivering a monologue that is unbelievably cheesy, even for her. It doesn't make a lick of sense why she would say these things. The speech is incredibly generic. It might as well have been written by a 12-year-old who thinks they are cool. So just flat out horrible piece of writing here with that monologue. And with the fact that Riggins doesn't do anything to Beth. Like he just stands there and listens. Why? Beth will take care of this Jamie problem, but first she has to do something at the ranch. She kidnaps a priest at gunpoint, brings him to the ranch and tells Rip they're getting married. Of course she does. Rip grabs Lloyd, so he's there as Rip's best man, which was good to see after everything Lloyd has gone through. They get married and Rip gives Beth his mother's wedding ring. He retrieved that at the end of season 3, and that's why he wasn't around when the attack took place back then. I haven't got too much to say about this really. I guess I'm glad they're finally married because I wanted to see the wedding this season, and it makes sense for Beth to want to do this because of what she has to do next. That is paying Jamie a visit at the Attorney General's office and pulling a gun on him and revealing that she knows about Riggins. Jamie finally admits here that it was Garrett who put all of this together, and she says this can go one of two ways. First option would go like this. Beth and John expose what Garrett has done and how Jamie didn't act despite knowing about it. Garrett would turn on Jamie and Jamie would spend the rest of his life in prison. Beth claims Garrett doesn't really love Jamie and he would turn on his son the first chance he got. The second option would see Rip kill Garrett, then Beth would tell Rip about the abortion and how Jamie had Beth sterilized, so it's not hard to guess what Rip would do next. Just as Beth gets ready to leave, Jamie starts begging on his knees and Beth comes up with a third option, and we soon learn what this one entails when Jamie goes back to his ranch. Garrett is sitting by a creek when Jamie arrives. He's all packed up and ready to leave, because remember, he can't be around if Jamie wants to run for governor. I've said throughout the season that Garrett was manipulating Jamie, and I still believe that, but I may have underestimated just how much Garrett actually loves Jamie. Because Garrett's speech here seems completely genuine when he tells Jamie to never let the Duttons deceive him into thinking he's a bad man. Garrett knows that his son is weak, he's got everything going for him, but his inability to fight the Duttons never changes. And if Jamie wants to be the main man around here, he's gonna have to figure out how he can stand up to the Duttons. Garrett tells his son he loves him. Jamie says it back before shooting him in the head. That was the third option. He takes his father's body to the train station where Beth surprises him by taking a photo of him carrying the body. She says Jamie belongs to her now and leaves. The final moments of the episode feature Beth and John. John is worried that Beth killed Jamie because John still loves Jamie and feels like he is his son. Beth tells him he can relax because Jamie is alive and they own him now. Carter enters the scene with 2 horses as Beth leaves. John doesn't feel like riding today because he can't see the point, but Carter says it's supposed to be just for fun. Rip told him that one day no one will ride, so they should enjoy it while they can. This gets John in the mood and they ride off as season 4 comes to an end. Thanks for watching this video, guys and gals. This one took a lot of time to put together, so I would appreciate it if you could like and share it. I've got quite a few other Yellowstone videos on my channel, and I'll leave links to some of those in the description box, so be sure to check those out. And you can leave your season 4 comments down below. And if you'd like, subscribe for more movie reviews and TV show breakdowns. That's it for now, take care and see you in the next video.